Back to the Future. Could it actually happen with a real time machine?
I was devastated. I thought if I could build a time machine that I could go back and see him again and tell him what was going to happen, maybe save his life. And so that became an obsession for me.
In 1995, a restless young tinkerer swore he had bent the laws of time in his garage. At first, his story sounded like the ramblings of a late-night caller until transformers went missing, blackouts rippled across Missouri, and he vanished in a sudden blaze. All that remained was a scorched note. It's not about time. It's about perspective. Years later, he reappeared, and the truth he carried was stranger than anyone could imagine.
On Einstein, Mallet believes he can bend time and space using light.
If I'm able to twist time into a loop, I can go from the past to the present to the future, but I'm on a loop, so I can go from the future back to the past.
The night he disappeared, ask anyone who lived on that quiet Missouri street, and they'll tell you, that night changed the neighborhood forever. Some remember the sound first. Not the clatter of tools, not the slam of a car door, but a deep, resonant hum. It wasn't like a lawnmower or even a generator. It was lower, heavier, almost alive. Porch lights flickered, TVs cut to static. The air began to smell like metal and rain. Through the cracks of his garage door, a thin blue glow leaked into the street. The kind of glow that doesn't belong anywhere natural. A curious neighbor stepped closer. It smelled like a thunderstorm, he'd later say. Like lightning before it hits. He almost knocked, then changed his mind. He was always building something strange, the man said. I figured he knew what he was doing. I didn't want to get fried. Moments later, there was a flash so bright it burned shadows onto the pavement. Then came the fire. At first, everyone thought it was an electrical accident, another one of his wild experiments gone wrong. But when the smoke turned black and began rising in twisting, unnatural columns, people realized it was something else entirely. The fire didn't spread outward like normal flames. It burned inward, collapsing toward its center, as if devouring itself. By the time firefighters arrived, it was too late. They expected to find a body. Instead, they found emptiness and that single burned note. It's not about time. It's about perspective. For weeks afterward, investigators tried to piece together what had happened. They cataloged melted circuit boards, fused wires, shattered glass. But no human remains, not even ash. It was as if the man had simply stepped out of existence. And so began the legend of the man who bent time. The Tinkerer. Before his disappearance, he was just another curious soul with a messy garage and a head full of impossible ideas. No degree, no funding, no lab, just passion, and perhaps obsession. Friends described him as a cross between a scientist and a dreamer, a man who could dismantle a television and rebuild it into something you couldn't even name. He'd stay up for days, one friend said, chasing an idea no one else could see. He was a master scavenger, collecting scrap from junkyards, salvaging copper from old appliances, and building contraptions that sparked, hummed, and occasionally exploded. But he wasn't just experimenting. He was chasing something bigger, a pattern he believed connected time, energy, and consciousness. That belief earned him both ridicule and fascination. In 1995, he called into Coast to Coast AM, the late-night radio show that thrived on mystery. Calmly and clearly, he described how he'd made a steel screw disappear using a modified Jacob's ladder and a focused laser array. It wasn't the claim that stunned listeners. It was the detail, the technical precision, the conviction. But ambition needs power. And power needs, well, electricity. So one night, he borrowed 6 massive transformers from a local substation, triggering blackouts across 3 Missouri counties. That stunt landed him in jail for a short time. But to his growing circle of believers, the arrest only added fuel. He wasn't crazy, he was dangerous. Dangerous to the laws that said time could only move forward. When he got out, he promised to continue the right way. He bought parts through classifieds, salvaged machines, wrote page after page of equations in oil-stained notebooks. And somewhere in the chaos of that garage, surrounded by copper coils and glass tubes, he began building the device that would one day make him disappear. The legend, when the fire consumed his garage, the man's story should have ended. Instead, it spread, first locally, then nationally, then digitally. Newspapers ran the headline, "Local Inventor Missing After Mysterious Garage Fire." When the note leaked, it's not about time, it's about perspective. The legend took off. Within weeks, his name was whispered across early internet message boards and underground chat rooms. On forums with names like Anomalies Net and The Hidden Path, people traded theories late into the night. He opened a rift. He's stuck between timelines. The government took him. Some claimed unmarked vans arrived hours after the fire. Others swore they saw agents removing boxes of equipment before dawn. Sightings followed a gas station in Nevada, a truck stop in New Hadaridam, Mexico, a blurry figure in a photo taken in Prague. Same face, same distant stare. Was it him? No one could say, but each rumor, each half-truth, each flicker of possibility made the myth stronger. By 1997, he had become an icon of fringe science, a cautionary tale, and a hero all at once. And then, just when the world had nearly forgotten, he came back. The return happened quietly, far from the place where he'd vanished. A small town, a gray morning, a man sitting alone on a park bench outside a cafe. He looked older, but unmistakable. His eyes seemed both calm and ancient, like he'd been watching the world from a distance. When the police checked his ID, they found it genuine. His fingerprints matched. It was him. Journalists swarmed. Cameras flashed. But he didn't run. He spoke softly, deliberately. "I didn't travel through time," he said. "Not the way you think." He carried a leather notebook filled with incomprehensible equations and sketches of machines that didn't exist. On his wrist, a watch with multiple dials, none that told the time. To some, he looked peaceful. To others, haunted. But all agreed. He was different. When asked where he'd been, he smiled faintly and said, "Everywhere, and nowhere that you'd recognize." Inside the layers, when he finally began to explain, the world leaned in. "It's not time travel," he said. "It's perspective travel." He described reality as a vast web, a living structure of intersecting threads. Every moment, every choice, every possibility exists simultaneously, looping and overlapping like strands of light. "We only experience one line," he said, "because our minds aren't built to see the rest." His experiment, he claimed, allowed him to shift perception, not to move his body through time, but to witness other threads. He spoke of walking through familiar rooms that weren't quite right. Furniture slightly moved, conversations with people who spoke differently, even meeting versions of himself who had made other choices. "The past and the future aren't places," he explained. "They're directions. I just learned how to look sideways. But there were dangers. If you stay too long in a thread that isn't yours," he warned, "you start to forget which one is home." He had almost lost himself. That much he admitted. Scientists dismissed it as metaphor. Philosophers called it revelation. To everyone else, it was simply awe. His return didn't prove anything, but it felt true, and sometimes feeling is more powerful than fact. Believers and skeptics. The world divided overnight. Believers hailed him as a visionary. Forums exploded with people dissecting every word. Some built small-scale replicas of his devices. Others turned his teachings into meditative practices meant to see the threads. To them, his message was liberating. You are not trapped in a single life. Every decision you could have made exists somewhere. Skeptics, meanwhile, demanded evidence. They pointed out that none of his machines survived the fire, that his notebooks were incomplete, that extraordinary claims need extraordinary proof. Psychologists called it a breakdown, a mind under too much strain, turning obsession into revelation. Yet, even in their disbelief, they couldn't ignore the beauty of the idea, because no matter how you saw it, as science, metaphor, or madness, his story forced a question into everyone's mind. What if our perception of time is just a trick of perspective? Lessons from the legend. Maybe he really did bend time, or maybe he just bent the way we think about it. Either way, his story left something behind. A spark. He reminded the world that curiosity, even reckless curiosity, is what moves us forward. That the search for understanding, no matter how strange, is what keeps us alive. He showed us that life might not be a straight line, but a branching forest of moments. That failure, regret, and success are all just different paths through the same web. And maybe that's why his story endures, because whether you believe him or not, you can feel the truth of it. We are all traveling through time. We are all shifting between perspectives. We are all threads in the same infinite tapestry. And somewhere, in one of those threads, a man in a Missouri garage smiles as his machine hums to life, whispering to no one in particular. It's not about time, it's about perspective.